Hi, Hi, everybody. My name is Gunnar Thorsteinsson, and I'll be moderating this conversation called Focus Iceland about Icelandic filmmaking. And it's an honor and a pleasure to introduce our panelists here today. Here we have Benedikt Erlingsson, the director of the film Hross í oss, or Of Horses and Men, which is in competition. We have Friðrik Þór Friðriksson, who is the producer of Horses and Men and a living legend in the Icelandic film industry. And we have Þorbjörg Helga Þorgilsdóttir, or Þóra, who is the star of the film Metalhead, which is also in competition at the festival. And we'll be talking about Icelandic cinema and sort of how it has developed and where it's at today. And one of the things I'd like to start by asking is sort of the films have both Of Horses and Men and Metalhead have been screening in various film festivals over the world. Do you see a difference in audience reception to the films in Iceland to when they are screened in other countries? This is generally a question for everybody.
Yes, the answer is yes and no. There is something that is true with, being local, you can become global. And in this case, I feel the film is transcending to other cultures, but you feel it in the Q&A. That's different what they ask about. In America, they asked very much about the Swedish girl in the film. What is the Swedish girl doing there? But in Sweden, they don't ask. It's very natural for them. And so there are some cultural differences, and in Japan, nobody asked about the disgrace killing. Why does he kill the horse? It was just very normal for the Japanese guy. Of course, he has to kill the horse. But that question is more in Germany and in America. So there is some. You can sense a little bit change of values sometimes, and it's very interesting. What is higher on what is more interesting, and also people have different knowledge of the cultures. So in the Nordic country, I don't have to explain things that I have to explain in Palm Spring.
But what helped this film is it's so visual, it's a low dialogue film, so people all over should really get the story.
Yes, I actually agree a lot with what Benedikt was saying. We got questions, for example, in Toronto, the guy who plays the friend in the movie, my friend, he takes snus, like in the nose, tobak, I don't know how to say this in English, and everybody in Toronto was like, what was he doing with the nose all the time? And they thought he was taking cocaine or something, and which he was not. So there was things like small things that were funny questions like this, but yeah, it just depends on the culture and the country.
But let's talk a bit about the sort of production process of making films in Iceland, because to give a bit of context for people who maybe are not fully aware of the country, it's a population of 320,000 people, and the fact that there are multiple films each year is quite remarkable in and of itself. But how does what's the actual production process? I mean, it's mostly the funds. There's the Icelandic Film Center, which gets government money, supports the films. But what's the process like? And especially with Friðrik here, has that process developed? How has that developed for the past decades?
Well, we have only been making films for 3 decades, so it's getting worse and worse, because when we started, people paid triple price to see an Icelandic film, and the distributor only got 20% of a normal ticket. But now we are almost the same price, and the distributor gets 38%. And the film fund only has money about budget over 1 film. And it was cut down heavily for next year, 40%. And it's the second time they do that in 4 years. So the situation is really, really tough now, especially for directors like Benedict, making their first films. It's almost impossible because they don't get funding from the Nordic Film and TV Fund and Urimas. So yeah, it's very difficult, but for old guys like me, it's much easier. It's automatic subscribers, also the distribution. So I think the government is trying to put together a new concept about how Icelandic films will be produced in the future. But we have one good thing, that is every filmmaker from Japan or America can come to Iceland and shoot, and they get 20% back what they spent there. So that has been keeping people in Iceland, because we get like 3 or 4 big Hollywood productions coming in every year, and that's where our people gain craftsmanships and money to survive, because it's much easier to, if you are a good grip guy, much easier to go to Norway and get job there. So that's the reason there is filmmaking, is this, because of this 20% payback, and that has been now for many years, but the government has to understand that without craftsmanship in this field, nobody would come to make films in Iceland. So that's why they are thinking about, and I hope more than thinking, they are at least asking me how I want to see this, and hopefully something comes out of it for the next year.
But one of the things that is quite common, if I'm not mistaken, in Icelandic films is that the productions tend to be halted because of lack of funding. And you have practical experience of that, Thora, with the last film you were in, The Deep, which played here last year. What's it like being an actress in a movie and you shoot the film and then there's a 2-year break where everything seems to be stalling? And
I actually, in that particular film, I don't think it was the lack of funding there. It was other things that delayed it. But of course, it's like I think they maybe have a better understanding how it works. But as I see it, you have to get funding, and you get that from Icelandic Film Fund. And to get money abroad, or to get funding, of course, abroad, you have to get the Icelandic Film Fund first. So of course, that's sometimes, if you don't get it there, I guess the projects have a longer time to finance it. But in this particular movie, The Deep, I don't think it was the finance that was delaying it. So, but maybe they can talk more about this.
No, and the danger is that people, you can make a film for, 200,000 Swedish, but that's like. Most of the films made last year were very, very low budget films, and they got maybe, it was common figures, 1,500, 2,000 people who bought the tickets to see those films, and that's the problem really, because if there is no screen value in the films, it spreads all over all Icelandic films. So last year was the worst year ever, compared to the old days when sometimes you got half of the nation to see your films.
So the bottom line, Icelandic filmmaking is in disaster. It is a disaster. We are in a civil war. We are in a cultural civil war, a value fight, and maybe that's what we always will be. But this is a catch-22 for first-time filmmakers. Nobody wants to give you anything because you have not done anything, and and it's a trap that you have to break through. I had a lot of experience from theater, but that did not give me credit in that sense. But this was, the big thing there for me was we got the film fund that comes with 1/3 of the money, and the rest you try to finance with co-productions and this funds that he mentioned. But they did not trust me to do this, so we had to find other way, and it was a hard time 2008 to find some people with means to invest in this film. Every bank was bankrupt in Iceland 2008.
Not the blood bank.
Yeah, not the blood bank, but the rest. I could have gone to the blood bank. Well, I went to the blood bank anyway. And
well, there is a fair amount
my own blood.
There is a fair amount of blood in your film, so.
Yes. So, and it was, to find wealthy or people with good means that would invest their money in a dangerous, business like filmmaking with a young first-time director was not easy. The wealthy people that could do it, maybe they were all criminals. It was very hard to find a wealthy man that was not a criminal in Iceland at that time, had escaped with his money to Tortola or somewhere else. But I found them. They were real people and they were closer than I thought. So this was really a group funding in a way. A lot of people that came with a little amount, and then we had an angel from Norway, Egil Ødegaard, that helped us, and then we got also a German co-production.
So, is the process of getting the film funded and getting, the means for production, is it that perhaps longer? How long has the process been for films?
For me, it was the biggest challenge. So I lined up with this very experienced man, Friðrik Thor, and it was very fortunate for me, and it was the only way to do it. And we had to really ride the storm, and it was talking about hold up, getting the green light. In the process I lost a lot of experienced people because we did not have the finance in time. And then this what he's saying has saved Icelandic filmmaking, the work for Hollywood. It was very hard for us because Tom Cruise, Ben Stiller, and Russell Crowe, Abramovich, they were there taking all the experienced people and all the equipments. So they were closing bridges and closing towns, and they were coming with helicopters and taking some dialogue scenes there, and we at the same time we were doing dangerous scenes there with a lot of horses on a road, but we couldn't even have a roadblock. We just were asking could you please wait? We have a dangerous scene that we are filming. So it was really, but we had a social capital that they did not have. But it was a competition also about talents and equipments, and so it's a double game,
But we've been talking. Do you want to say something? But we've been talking about the American productions that have been filming in Iceland, and for those who don't know, films like The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, the Ben Stiller film Prometheus from Ridley Scott, the Tom Cruise film Oblivion, the new Darren Aronofsky film Noah, all these films have shot much of their films in Iceland. The new Christopher Nolan film Interstellar is Game of Thrones, the TV series. Is this the sort of the government has created this environment where they do pay back some of the money spent, but do you imagine this being a bubble that will burst at some point, that people we've filmed these locations have been filmed, we've seen them now in all these different projects, and then they'll get bored and go to the next place? Or is this a sustainable thing for the Icelandic film industry, do you think?
Well, there are so many things to get in Iceland, that you don't get, for example, in Malta or in Morocco, which are also very popular locations, because the currency is so down. It went down after the crash 2008, 100%. So instead of paying just price of a coffee is 100% cheaper. So they get, we are just like the niggers of the north, really. And so it's kind of a slavery, really, these productions. And as long as the currency is so low, I think people will come, because you can find endless locations in Iceland. You can shoot almost every country. Like we were thinking about doing, one producer wanted to shoot Afghanistan in Iceland, and we found the perfect location for Afghanistan. So even though Iceland is kind of in fashion, mainly because of the music industry, I think the music groups like Sigur Rós and the talent like Björk has made, you know, appearance in soundtracks for films, and then people start to talk about Iceland, and of course a lot of filmmakers, for example, in the States, see our films, so that's why they could get interested, and they come and visit frequently. You know, like Quentin Tarantino has visited Iceland like 3 times without shooting, but he's always planning to shoot. So, but he's like a radio station. He talks loud and blah 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 everywhere, like a real American, and that's something that has advertised the location, and also the craftsmanship. You know, because if you go to a place where there's no local film industry, you can't. Then you have to import everything, and that's more or less the same as shoot it in the States or in Canada.
But let's talk a bit about music, I think, because both, I think, Metalhead perhaps more overtly is very much based around music, and I think the music in Of Horses and Men is a very driving force of the film, and when you see the horses running and the sort of beat of the music sounds like the trotting of the horses, and also because, as Frederick mentioned, so many of the musical bands, well, Iceland exports a lot of music into the world, a remarkable amount. Well, let's start maybe with Metalhead. How do you feel? Because what I felt watching Metalhead was, this is a melodrama, but only the mellow in this case is metal. How is the sort of musical aspect ingrained into the film? Because I think that's also, if you look back even at Frederick's career, one of his earliest films is Rock in Reykjavik, a terrific documentary about the Icelandic punk scene. So I think the film world and the music world has always been ingrained somehow. How did that work out for Metalhead? How did the music sort of, did you feel like the music shaped the film, or did the?
Oh, it's a long question.
Yeah, sorry, I was.
No, but yeah, it's a good question. I like, you know, this new word that you invented, metal drama. Maybe this could be a new genre. But of course, in Metalhead, there's not a lot of Icelandic music, because you know, it's in this time where the movie is, it's almost just metal from the States or from the UK, and so. But of course, it's a movie. It's called Metalhead, so it has a lot of music, and also I think it's very nice. I don't know if you have seen the movie, but it's screening later today if you want to see it. It's fun to see this kind of music come together with Icelandic nature. I think it was kind of fun to see how that played together, and of course, you know, in a film that's called Metalhead, the music has a big part of it. But also, I think, just want to add, also like the nature and all the Icelandic nature's shots are very beautiful there. But I don't know what to say more about the music, actually.
No. But what was the process of creating the music for Of Horses and Men?
Yes, you know, I usually hate music in films, you know. Or I'm very picky, and I have strong opinions, and the music for me was very important. It's essence thing that and I think it's not easy to work with music in that sense, that music opens up, makes big space, or it has a contrapunct. It's commenting on action, so it's not. And we have also the Mickey Mousing, you know, as we call Mickey Mousing, when the music is telling the same as the pictures, you know, in a way. So there are a lot of these elements, and And the music in this film is we are working with these elements, but at the same time we wanted to be very national and international at the same time, because the concept of the film is a little bit, you know, this is an international island. You know, the tourists are also part of the fauna, of the flowers. You know, so we are, you know, this is just the island. People that are there and love the island are the islanders in a way. So. And so we had references to Balkan and to Italian films, Sergio Leone, or you know, Fellini even, and then old Icelandic themes. And it was a very intensive work with this great musician Davíð Þór Jónsson, and he is a very high-profile character, part of the Icelandic music scene, and plays every instrument. And
he happens to be a genius.
Yeah, happens to be a genius, and it was very inspiring. And for me, it was really to make the film the fourth time. As you say, you know, first you write the film, and you write the script, and then when you shoot it, you can, you know, shoot another film. It will not reflect, or it's a new version. And then you edit it together, and then you can make a new version. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's the fourth version that you can make. You can change, make it or break the film. It's in the music or the sound level.
It's the spice for the food.
Yeah. Well.
But one of the things that you brought up now was the fact that there's a foreign character in your film who's a tourist and I feel like that's often a recurring idea in Icelandic film, is that there are foreigners that arrive to the island and are neither sort of befuddled or inspired by the country. And
Friðrik has made a beautiful film about this, you know,
called Cold Fever, which I highly recommend. And it's also a part of Metalhead. Without sort of giving away too many of the details, why do you think this has become such a recurring motif in Icelandic film? Are we just so inherently fascinated by what foreign people think of us that we just need to like have those characters to sort of bounce off on?
I think it's like a mirror, you know, in a way. It's like when you see a Mr. Beam sketch with Mr. Beam, there is always another one straight face, you know, watching him, you know, doing nothing, and it's through this normal guy that we see how absurd Mr. Beam is. So it's also part of that game, you know. But of course, it's a minority complex. We are just a little tribe on this island, and we love to have, you know, somebody watch us and reflect us. I think it's an ongoing theme. In the Icelandic sagas, we have all these mystical characters where it comes Eastman, Östmaður. He is really, you know, usually he's a bad guy, but the worst guys
are the sweetest.
Are the Swedes. They call it ghosts. They're Swede. When there comes a Swede into the Icelandic sagas, then something dangerous will happen. And if he killed, he becomes a terrible ghost. You know, it's always a Swede. Then you were, oh my God, there is a Swede now. Somebody, you know.
Well, you have a Swede in your film. Do you think that's a reflection of the Icelandic saga?
Yeah, it's the only hero in the film, you know, the Swedish girl.
So you're trying to sort of
trying to, you know,
make the opposite image of the Swede.
I'm very fascinated, in fact, by Swedish culture. I'm a fan of Cornelius Vreeswijk and Bellman, and I was brought up here in Malmö Theatre School. I was there a student and assistant, and so for me, it was also homage to that, but the fact is that also Iceland is full of Swedish, Danish, Norwegian, and German girls that are working with horses. And they are the true, you know, heroes of the horse industry in Iceland. They are like nuns, you know, nuns married to Jesus Christ. They are like married to the Icelandic horse, and they do everything. They even marry a lousy farmer just to be near to horses. So we are very grateful to them, and I wanted to make a tribute to them.
How do you think the presence of the foreigners in Metalhead is sort of, do you think it serves a similar function there?
Yes, actually, you know, like he talks about the Swedes and the horses. We have some Norwegian guys who come and visit the farm, and I don't know if you know much about the metal scene, but you know, Sweden and Norway there's a big metal scene, and of course in Norway it has, you know, it's a lot of black metal, and so yeah, they have, you know, and this is the same. It's because of it's so popular with metal in Norway. They come, but you have to also. We think Norwegian people are very funny. So I just had a very hard time acting the scenes with them, also because they have such a funny English accent with a Norwegian. And these guys that are in the film, there's fun to say that they are not actors. They were just guys who played the guitar at home and saw a casting advertisement and sent in, and all of a sudden they were in Iceland for 2 weeks shooting a movie. So this was an experience, and yeah.
One of the things that I find interesting when I watch Icelandic films is how often, if you think about sort of how the population is split, most of the country lives in Reykjavik or in the surrounding suburbs, but so many of the movies are set in the countryside, and that applies to both of your films. Do you think, sort of, why do you think there's a reason for that, or do you think that's just sort of by happenstance? Because if you look, I think a disproportionate amount of the stories we see on screen are set in the countryside, which not that many people live in, actually. Is that something you think reflected upon when you were making the movies?
I think this is like with nature resources. They are dangerous, you know. And the Icelandic landscape has been very dangerous for Icelandic film, because the tendency is like this, you know, make a beautiful postcard, of course, and, you know, you cannot tempt. You move a love scene to a cliff, you know. And then, you know, next scene you are moving it up to a mountain, you know, where there's a great view and so on. And but I think maybe Hollywood is saving us, because they're using all the mountains, so we cannot use them anymore. But of course, it's a resource that we have, and it heightens the tension. And maybe it's very primitive, you know.
We have a beautiful fog.
Beautiful fog, yes. Beautiful rain. I even tried to make a short film in fog, but there came good weather, so I was stuck with the mountains.
Yes, and I guess we like Icelandic filmmakers like challenging, you know, challenge, and the weather is very much a challenge in Iceland. We, for example, were waiting for snow, which usually is not a problem, but this year when we were shooting, this was a lot of problems. So we ended up like waiting and waiting, and there was a little snow, and we're like, oh, it snows, so let's drive, and then the snow was gone, and so I don't know. Maybe it's therefore we want to challenge ourselves. But also about Metalhead, Ragnar, the director, who really wanted to be here, but he won't come until Saturday. He is from a small place in the countryside, so Metalhead, and he is a metal fan, so therefore our movie is also shot in the countryside.
So Fredrik, why are you always shooting in the country? What is it with you? And
well, for me, I just, when I finish the film in my head, then it gets painful to have it in your head. And it doesn't matter if it's a city or you just want to get rid of the pain. So most of my films are just painkillers. I have to get rid of this out of my head. So it has nothing to do with landscape really, but I think when you see a weak film and it's a boring film, then you start to look at the landscape and you forget the story. And I have seen that never in my film, of course, because but in some other films, then I start to think, where is this shot, and things like that. And I especially saw one Danish film that was shot in Faroe Islands, and very lousy film, but the beautiful, beautiful landscape behind it. And I think this comes also, you know, when you are a young filmmaker and you want to make your first film, and there's a screen value in the landscape, so that's probably the cheapest way to make good screen value is to go out in the nature, you know. But for me, bad weather is my favorite conditions to work in. When it's like in cold fever, we were freezing many times. And I just had a driving license then, and me and my camera were driving on those slippery roads, and each time I went off the road, and we were sometimes blocked in the snow, sometimes not upside down. And there I always said, here we should, God wants us to put up the camera here. And he said, I agree, and we were crawling out of the Jeep. And that's how we choose the angles, really. And usually we love to, when it's very stormy and icy, that's something that you can't create even with Hollywood technique nowadays, you know. So I love to, and in one of my next film, not the next one, but one after that, is taking place in a very, very beautiful landscape. But you will never see the landscape because it will always be stormy weather and snow blitz, and in a very isolated part of Iceland.
But also, just like these two films are, you know, a lot of landscape and in the countryside. But actually, like the movies that have been high in the cinema before that has been actually, you know, Svartur Lake, like these cities, like more like what do you call this kind of movies?
Basically, some of them have been sort of genre films or sort of crime films.
Yeah, crime films, and have taken place in Reykjavik. So I think this now we're coming back to doing it in the countryside in a way.
Yeah.
Contraband as well.
Yeah, but what's the sort of the distribution sort of aspect, and how does it function to get your film into the theater? I think people would be curious how many movie theaters there are in Iceland. Is there a big demand for Icelandic films from the Icelandic audiences themselves, and how does that function?
Well, we have plenty of screens, but it used to be 52 screens in Iceland. I think it's only 25 now. So like I said earlier, it's getting worse and worse to get people in cinemas. Because now, well, my theory is the young people are the main audience from 16 to 25, and those people are just drugged with action films. And the older people have been scared away from the theater because when they want to see a film like his film, then you have to listen to you have to look through 20 minutes of trailers of criminal stuff, cutting throats, and they put horrible things, and the sound is awful for middle-aged people. So they prefer to watch it on television.
And then they cut the film in half and have pause.
Yeah, that's something I wanted to bring up.
It's a very barbaric thing, you know.
Yeah, so I have compared it a lot with young people the young people don't care what they eat anymore. So fast food is similar as American film, and what we are trying to do is making a decent national dish like sheepheads and sharks and things like that. And of course, there is not much market for it. But when I go to see an Indian film, I want to go into Indian culture. I have to learn something. I will have to get.
I don't know if you heard. He was talking about they are cutting the film fund 40% or something like this. And also, what I think that's been wrong with Iceland, the discussion has been so sad in a way. They have been talking about, you know, they put headlines in the newspapers about, I'd rather live than to go to theater. And meaning, like, I would rather have the hospitals than have to go to theater or something like this. So the discussion has been kind of sad in a way and very low. So I'm hoping it's true what Benedict says. It's going to be a renaissance, and we're just going to move up from this.
No, it's also very striking when you think about how many, the lead up to this festival, there have been a lot of, the discussion is going further and further with people debating the budget cuts. But right now, what's happening right here is there's a huge focus on Icelandic film, not just the new films, but also some films of the past, and we're here talking about Icelandic film, and this is not really reported on. These sort of the very positive things and the positive response from other countries and the attention, that's not the focus.
Yeah, I understand the ratio is very, very high of Icelandic films going to festivals, you know, and part of that is, of course, the Icelandic Film Fund that is doing something right, we hope. And Yeah, but you know, we have to make film for us. It has to be an essence, you know, in a way. We have to. It's the mentality of the island people also, you know, or maybe a small nation of the mirror, you know. It's easy, you know, do it for the tourist or do it for ourselves. You know, culture is in essence is something that we are doing for each other. We are entertaining each other, educating each other, educating through entertainment, you know, and it is called culture, and that is, you know, not for to show somebody else, it's for us. And but the mirror that we are always getting from the media, you know, nothing has any value except it has an honor from abroad, you know. Then it has value in the media, and then we get a positive mirror. So there is a lot of things like this that we have to change, you know. In the new renaissance, in our new age of cinema and culture, we and Abba and Friðrik, we are going to make a new mentality, you know. And it's not about nationalism, or it's just about a value, you know.
But one of the also a thing that has happened in the past few years is the fact that 2 Icelandic films have been remade in the US, and which also brought a lot of attention. And I also think a lot of the conversation then, if you were making a film that had any sort of kind of crime element or any sort of that, became like, the discussion became, oh, this director in the US is interested in remaking it, and this producer has talked to this and this producer about remake rights. And even with Metalhead, there have been discussions that Metalhead might be remade. Is that, how does that looked upon within the Icelandic film?
It means that the film must be very bad if someone wants to make a remake. If it's American thing, you know,
well, let's
like
look at the 2 Icelandic films that have been remade.
Look at it as a food again. If someone eats a rotten shark, in Iceland it's a delicatessen, and if someone in America wants to cook it as American dish, it's a very bad idea.
But have you, like, when you were making Metalhead, was there any discussion that, oh, maybe Fred Durst from the band Limp Bizkit will be interested in remaking this film, as is happening right now?
No, that conversation did not occur. I don't know. I don't remember. We thought about it when we heard it first, like who would play this and what kind of music, blah blah blah. I don't know. This gets attention in the media for sure. That's true. What you say in Iceland, they always talk about it. But I don't know. I don't have a strong opinion about it. But of course, I would be, you know, I would be very interested in seeing how they would do it then.
But if you continue in this line of thinking about the Renaissance and the Renaissance of Icelandic film, do you think that the proposed budget cuts might create an environment where people sort of alternative methods of funding, and do you think it might end up having a sort of a creative, that with these limitations?
No, absolutely not, because now there is no film production company existing in Iceland. I used to have a big company, and we could lose money. I mean, if I was a producer of these 2 films, I would lose a lot of money. And there is no such company that can invest in taking risk anymore. So there are only very small companies with no overhead. And that means that they have no money to invest in, you know, to hire writers to make a script out of this beautiful book and things like that. So the only thing is that could make this so-called renaissance is more money, and also money, people who really can make films that makes money, so they can invest in films like those 2 films, you know, because it's a risk, you know. It's just like when we made, and this money for my company came, for example, you never know what you have. Like when I made The Angels of the Universe, and the film had 4 suicides in it, and we expected maybe 5,000 to 6,000 people to see the film, but it turned out half of the nation saw the film, and so you never know what, and we were able to take that risk at that time because we we were quite well off. We had our own equipment, trucks, and so on, and so we could always risk a lot in every film. You know, I produced like 70 films in my life, and I have lost money of every. This is the first film I have made that I have not directed that will probably in the future make money, small money. So, but everyone else has been usually just a disaster.
But I want to further on this, you know, about the export. You know, in a way, in the big cultural context of Iceland, you can say that when Icelandic culture has been an export product, ideas that are produced in Iceland that are bought for money, you know, in other countries. This happens in the 12th century. You know, Snorri Sturluson writing the stories of the Norwegian royal family, poets of Iceland, you know, licking the ashes of the royalty in Scandinavia with great poems.
We created Norway because
of course we created Norway, and you know, and so that you say there was there's ideas in export from Iceland. Then this stops. And then it's just starting in this beginning of the century with Gunnar Gunnarsson, Halldór Laxness, Jóhann Sigurjónsson. This was writers and playwriters in the beginning of the century, that their plays, their romance, you know, Halldór Laxness become an export. People from abroad are buying this stuff. And then after that, I think it's just first with, and in the music it was Jón Leifs maybe. But then it's first with Friðrik Thor's film, you know, Children of Nature, and his film, that there's an export from Iceland. And from that on, we have the sugar cubes, Björk, and the music industry. And then comes a lot of filmmakers. And authors are now also popular. Icelandic authors are selling 100,000 copies of their books in France, etc. So, both criminals and romance. So if you look at the big content, we see when there's a when we are selling abroad. So now you can say, okay, we are doing something right, but yet there is a civil war ongoing. But that's always the reason when something, it seems to be a theme, you know, in culture history. It has to be a civil war somehow if something has to happen.
But I think it's time for us to open up the floor for if there are any questions from the audience, and you'll be passed a microphone. So if anybody's curious. Oh, no questions as of yet. Oh, right one over there.
Now, one of you said that if I want to see an Indian film, then I want to learn something about India. Now, I've just seen your film, and I also saw the one last year, The Deep. And I think this last film that was shown today is unwittingly perfect tourist propaganda. Of course, you didn't mean it to be like that, but seeing the background, seeing the horses, hearing, I mean, the patter of the hoofs and different gaits and so on, it's perfect. And I'm sure that hundreds or maybe even thousands of people from Sweden, Germany, and so on, that we already have some people going to Iceland, but I'm sure that a lot more will be enticed to go to Iceland to experience this, not because you made propaganda, but because they liked what they saw. And all the people and horses at the end and so on. Did you ever think of going to the tourist industry saying, hey, we've done a lot for you?
I agree to you because, you know, it was not my aim, but I knew the extra product would be the tourist propaganda. I have swore on my knees I've crawled to the tourist industry. Please help me. There was no money from the tourism, no money from the horse industry, nada. We have even an institution called Íslandsstofa. We have that is got a lot of money to promote Iceland as a tourist country. There is nothing from them. So I will just say to them, fuck them.
They have never believed us, for example.
So erase this from the. It's not good. It's not for good for me.
For example, after Children of Nature got very popular in Japan, they published a booklet, 80 pages, and in the middle of the book is a map of Iceland, and it's drawn the way the old farmer went, the main character, and then up where the film ended. And there are still today, 20, 30 years since the film was popular, people are going the same route. and quite often they get lost in the Westfjords. And that's another story.
Do you think that the fact that your film might be popular and maybe be seen by many thousands of Icelanders, of course, and maybe get a prize or an Oscar or something, do you think that will influence the funding of further films? Or could you go back and say, hey, I've got a prize, or you, and now I want money? Because in Sweden, as I'm told, you can say, well, so many thousands of people saw this film, I'll get more money after making the film. But that's a bit late, isn't it?
So. Yeah, well, sometimes it doesn't matter how many sees your film. And for example, I was in China, and the Chinese television bought 6 of my films, and I said, how many people will see the film here? Then the guy said, the first premiere of the film, something around 600 million. So for example, films like Children of Nature is seen maybe by 800 million.
But this is interesting because, of course, this is just the extra product, of course. The image thing, the tourism, the attraction. They say that people come to Iceland 90% because of some pictures, some images. I think Friðrik Thor's films have an incredible effect on tourism in Iceland, but that is nobody that measure that in a way. It's not registered in that sense.
But we have been trying to say this in the Civil War.
In the Civil War, we have been pointing, how the value of culture in the tourist, thing.
They even made a clip about Ben Stiller, because he was shooting in Iceland, where he said, this clips to the interviews where he's talking about Iceland and so on. So, but yeah.
But of course, we have to remind us always. But this is not this is not our mission, but it's so easy because, we start to, talk about this too much and try to get money, attention because of this extra product. And it can affect the culture in a way. The culture can be, start to, like an actor starting to flirt to the publicum,
Yeah, are there any other questions from the audience? Nobody at this moment. So let's talk about, you mentioned this, sort of a unique element of going to see movies in Iceland, which is the fact that every movie has an intermission forced upon it. Is that something that you as filmmakers have tried to sort of fight against? Do you have any power to, because that is, as you said, a disruptive force when you're watching the film. Is that something that, the intermission, the pause in the middle?
Is this not like that in Sweden? Or?
No.
Okay.
No, it's just like we can choose.
Okay.
But the cinema owners are really shopkeepers. They get their income out of selling popcorns and soft drinks. So if there is an intermission, then they sell twice as much. So they are against it. And then the audience is also for it. That has been proven.
No, not the old.
No, that's true. I know.
Well,
I know.
They say that the Icelanders need to piss more often. You know, they have their bladder, you know, is smaller than in other nations, so they cannot sit for 80 minutes. You know, they have to have a cut after 45 minutes and get to the toilet.
No, it's some kind of leftover. It's back to the beer again, because it's a leftover from when the cinema was the meeting point. So if you had a crush on a girl, there was always a possibility you would have a chance to meet her during the intermission, or even in stories from the old days that people got a driving license and they wanted to drive the car, and they went out in the intermission and drove around to cinema and went back. So it was a kind of a social event, the intermission. And because still people want this, these youngsters who are going to cinemas.
I don't think they want it, but they say, I had actually read an article about this. They say, the people that own the cinema, they say, as long as people buy stuff, we're not gonna, you know, we're gonna have this. And as long as they have it, people are gonna go and buy stuff because they don't have anything to do. So it's...
But do you find it disruptive as filmmakers, knowing that the people will walk out in the middle?
Yeah, absolutely. Now the film is playing the 5th month in Iceland, and it has moved to another cinema called Cinema Paradise. There is no intermission, and it's increasing. The older generation is coming, and it's picking up audience now. So I think part of it is because there is not this brutality, you know, of intermission, and there's not so brutal trailers shown. So it's a part of the new renaissance. We have to, you know, we have to fight for that.
We own the cinema. Because it belongs to the filmmakers unions.
Any questions at all?
How long is the interval?
Depends on how much popcorn is available.
50 minutes, 20,
50.
15, 10 minutes.
I think when I moved away from Iceland and started going to movies here, for example, where there isn't an intermission, you sort of realize how disjointed it is. And then going back and seeing a movie with an intermission, it's a bit like if you went to an art gallery and saw half a painting and then went to another room and saw the other half and sort of had to imagine what it looked like together. It's a very weird effect.
Especially for sensitive films.
Yeah. Well, I think we've talked about. I think I like the idea of the cultural civil war, and I like the idea of the Renaissance, and
to have something positive here.
Yeah, the Icelandic, like they might cut the budget, but I think people will always want to make films, and hopefully people will always want to go see films in some form or another. So if there are no more questions from the audience, I think it's time for us to wrap up. So I'd like to thank you all for being here.
Time for intermission.
Time for an intermission.
Thank you.
Time for intermission.